to The Premise. I'm Jennifer Thompson.
And I'm Chad Thompson.
Wait, who are you?
Chad from accounting.
Chad from accounting.
Accounts.
Chad never talks. People are like, who is this guy? What do you do here, Chad? Tell us about yourself. I'm kidding.
I'm the one who makes things work.
You do. You make it all happen. He's the behind the scenes guy who makes me sound good. Without Chad, I am nothing.
Now that's a bit far.
And today we have the incredible pleasure of speaking with Susan Lieu, who is an amazing human. I think this across the board. I've done a ton of research on you, and I've read your book, and I love it so much. So I am just honored to have you here. Welcome to The Premise, Susan.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
There's a fine line between a ton of research and stalking.
There is I think it's the same thing, isn't it?
Well, when you
intentions, maybe.
When you say a ton of research, is it like 4 Google tabs? Like, what are we talking about?
No, I'm
here?
more like a 20 Google tabs kind of gal.
All right.
There are very few things that give me anxiety, but looking at her Google tabs are one of them.
I'm like, why is my computer so slow? Chad's like, maybe it's the 50 tabs you have open on Susan Lieu. But maybe not. All right. It could just be our internet. All right, I'm going to read your bio so our lovely listeners know who you are and what you're about. And then we will ask you some questions. Susan Lieu is a Vietnamese American author, playwright, and performer who tells stories that refuse to be forgotten. A daughter of nail salon workers, she took her award-winning autobiographical solo show, 140 Pounds, How Beauty Killed My Mother, on a 10-city national tour with sold-out premieres and accolades from the Los Angeles Times, NPR, and American Theater. 8 months pregnant, she premiered her sequel, Over 140 Pounds, which I love that name, at ACT Theater. Is it ACT or ACT Theater?
It's ACT.
Okay.
You got it.
Awesome.
You got it.
She is a proud alumna of Harvard College, Yale School of Management, Coro, Hedgebrook, and Vashon Artist Residency. She is also the co-founder of Sokola Chocolatier, which we'll talk a little bit about, an artisanal chocolate company based in San Francisco. Susan lives with her husband and son in Seattle, where they enjoy mushroom hunting, croissants, and big family gatherings. The Manicurist Daughter is her first book. Again, Susan, welcome to The Premise.
Thank you so much. Everything you said checks out.
It's all right. It's all true.
I think so. Yeah.
So you're opening a new location for your chocolatier.
Yes. My sister and I started a chocolate company, Sokola, which means chocolate in Vietnamese, 23 years ago as teenagers, selling in front of my dad's nail salon during the summer farmers market. We have a storefront in San Francisco and Soma for the last 10 years. Second store is going to be in San Francisco Airport, Terminal 3, opening in August.
That is awesome. Now, what airline's going to Terminal 3?
United, but actually walking across the terminals is a pretty short walk. So you can fly the friendly skies wherever you want to go. And you can always stop by our store and take home a little San Francisco with you.
Nice. And you can order online as well.
Yes, we are on the internet.
You have you're doing it all right. You've made it possible for people to order from anywhere.
Yeah.
Is that a problem, shipping chocolate, because of like heat and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, June through August, like you have to pay a little bit more of a premium because we'll be packing it with more ice packs and things like that. So chocolatiers hate summer. We hate it. So I cannot wait for the fall to come.
So whose idea was it to start making chocolate and selling it at the farmers markets?
Yeah, so my parents had a nail salon across the street from the Santa Rosa Plaza, the mall, and every time we walked in, we would pass by C's Candies, and my sister and I would go get a sample, and we'd try it. And during the Christmas holidays, all the customers would give us boxes and boxes of C's Candies, and we always found it a little too sweet.
Totally,
we have this,
yeah.
like Vietnamese palate. And so one day my sister just gets a recipe from Gourmet Magazine, makes a chocolate truffle espresso, shares it with some friends. Our neighbor across the street was like, why don't you turn this into a business? And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And at the time, I was a board member for our farmers market. Because,
Wait, how old were you?
I was 16.
Oh, okay.
Because
Wow, you were a board
On the
member
board
at
at the farmer's
16.
market.
That makes sense. Yeah, right.
I was on a number of boards, actually. I know. I mean, I'm next level, baby. Like, I'm just kind of like, who? I look back on my life and I'm like, I don't understand, but that's still cool. So I got us a spot, and then our neighbor across the street, she worked for a talk radio show. She's like, great, why don't you just come in and be on air next week and bring your products? And I was like, oh, great.
Wow.
I go back to my sister and I tell her everything that's happening. She was like, are you dumb? We don't even have a business name. We don't have a story. And I was like, hush, please. We drive to Office Depot. I open some clip art on Microsoft, and I find like a corner of like an Eiffel Tower, and I just play around with Sokola with italics fonts, and I was like, see? And then we print it out and we iron it on shirts. It was just so funny. But then that's how it all
That
came
is
about.
incredible. An entrepreneur at heart, as was your mother
Yes.
and your father.
Yes.
We're going to get into that. But I have to know, where does the name Sokola come from?
Yeah, Sokola means chocolate in Vietnamese. And so I think because
So
we
easy.
are
Yeah.
children of Vietnamese refugees, we thought like this would be our defining mark in the space,
So
right?
cool.
Is to
Yeah.
reflect our heritage. So a lot of our flavors are Vietnamese inspired. We have durian, jasmine tea, pho flavor, sriracha chili. It's quite wonderful that now when we look at food today, a lot of fusing in your own culture is very normal now.
Yeah.
But when we started 2 decades ago, it was not that cool. And we were really entering this like white male dominated market where it was just like produce French flavors with excellence,
Wow.
right? And it
Yeah.
wasn't more about like, how do you interpret this work? So it's been a journey, and I'm so proud of my sister. She's the chief chocolatier, and we've made chocolates for Cartier and Ferrari.
Wow.
and
So
it's-
cool.
It's wild. It's wild what the American dream looks like for children of refugees.
I have to say, I have a good relationship with chocolate. We know each other well. And I'm a dark chocolate. I do not like C's candies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're dark.
I am a dark girl, and I
Yeah.
love interesting flavors. So I can't wait. Now, I know we're not here to talk about chocolate, but I like it anyway. So let's talk about this book. So listeners, this book is called The Manicurist's Daughter, a memoir. And it is fantastic. Like, I dove in. You're such a good writer, Susan.
Thank you. It's so
Yeah.
funny. In 7th grade, my brother was like, "You're not good at writing," and I was like, and I just believed him. No, I believed him, and so I never really saw myself as a writer or as an artist or a storyteller. You know, I never saw that as my identity. And so for you to say that to me, that feels really good.
But that is part of the book, as you were searching for your identity. And then this terrible thing happened that just crashed your whole family. But of course, this is your story. But tell our listeners what this book is about, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah. So this is what happens when the American dream goes terribly wrong. When I was 11 years old, my mother died from a botched tummy tuck. And for the next 2 decades, my family has never spoken of her or how she died. And so when I was upon my 30s and I was getting a lot of pressure from my dad to have kids, I thought to myself, how can I become a mother if I don't know my own? So this book is my quest to know her so I can then be a part of intergenerational healing.
Yeah.
Around the unresolved grief, around the grief with our bodies, around who we think we can be. And so that's what the book is.
Yeah. And she was really an incredible human. And as you say at the end of the book, you know, she was a hero to a lot of people, but she was really complicated too. And I'd like people to kind of get a sense of who this woman was. So she was a refugee. I mean, you refer to she and your father as boat people, boat refugees.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about like how they came to the United States and then what she did.
Yeah. So Fall of Saigon happens in April 1975. My parents are married at this point, and everyone's trying to figure out how to get out. You know, like folks are disappearing, going into labor camps. No one is really allowed to make money. And so eventually my mom is like, we got to get out. But she doesn't have enough money. Both my mother and father, they didn't finish high school. They grew up in the Mekong Delta in a really rural area, one dirt road. To this day, there's only still one road. And so she starts an underground lottery operation where she's selling these tickets and she's getting her sisters to participate too. And then she starts betting on herself. She gets dreams of combinations of numbers to pick. When she thinks someone is right and they have a premonition of what's going to win, she bets on those with other people. And she wins the lottery 3 times to have enough money to then buy these one-way tickets where they're attempts for her, my father, and my 2 brothers, who are at this time, I think, like 3 and 5. And so they, when the person, the coyote says, okay, tonight's the night, they make an attempt to go to catch this like little dinghy boat to go onto another boat to brave the ocean to hopefully make it to another country.
Wow.
The first 5 attempts, things are foiled. You know, like, and every time you have to either run back through the jungle, you lose your way, you have dehydration, it's like everything is going wrong. And she is relentless. And she says, I'm going to do it. And on the 6th time, they make it.
Wow.
My sister is born in a refugee camp in Malaysia. And then in 1983, they come to the United States. We're in the Bay Area because my dad's sister is here. We're on welfare. We're trying to figure out how are we going to do this? My mom's a seamstress. My dad's a newspaper boy. And my mom is smart, all right? Because clearly with the lottery, she's like looking at the numbers. And she says, there's no way I'm going to sponsor over my family if we don't get off welfare. So how are we going to do that?
Right.
People are starting to make money with nails. And then she gets into the business.
And she started doing hair as a hairdresser, right?
That's right. That's right. She went to beauty school, cosmetology school, started as a hairdresser, but it became very clear that that's where the money was going to be, was in nails. And so when she eventually, she starts doing nails and then we get off welfare and that's when she can sponsor over her 3 sisters and her parents. And then that is how the nail salon empire starts to build.
And how many people did she sponsor in total to come over?
So initially the first 5 and then my cousin was 6.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about chain migration because over time, those 3 aunts have sponsored over like so many other of my cousins who then sponsored over their parents and then sponsored over like a clan. Like it's so crazy because when I had a small career in international development. And when we think about all the money that we throw towards humanitarian aid and we want this and that to work or what philanthropists are trying to do to make a difference, I'm sitting here going, invest in families.
Yeah, right? Totally. Well, and oh my God, what a conversation right now. Just immigration in general and American policies and just the nonsense. We don't typically like to get too political, but I think it's a good time in American history to get political. But yeah, like to look at your family and what a beautiful, aside from the fact that, the situation with your mom, that is tragic, but the rest of your family, and you went to Harvard and Yale. And I mean, that's what we expect, right? That's what we, not what we expect. That's what people talk about as the success story, right? That you come over and you want it so badly to succeed. Like that's what the American dream is supposed to be, right?
That's right. And I do want to say for the record, my parents always wanted me to go to UC Berkeley. They didn't know Harvard existed.
And your dad was disappointed that you didn't go to Stanford. He was like, Harvard? Why aren't you going to Stanford?
Yeah, and I was like, bye, I didn't get in. And he was just like, and then he like hung up. He was like, I got a customer, bye.
Wow.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, her dad.
Cold.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not cold, right? I think it just reflects the time and the understanding of how he thought America worked and how I thought America worked and what we both knew, right? Because his English is elementary, right? But I was born in America and I had a different understanding. And I think that's part of what the book is about is how do we grapple with intergenerational trauma and healing?
Yeah.
When we are when we hold multiple identities, when we are othered, I never felt Vietnamese enough. I never felt American enough. How do we find connection when everyone in their own respective positions are just trying to survive and make it?
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And frankly, through food, a lot of times that's how we find connection, is through food. And you and your sister figured that out when you were 16.
Yeah.
But
go for it.
No, you go for it.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm like, see, that's it though. Love and food are intertwined. And so even though my mother had died from a botched tummy tuck, I still can recall 1 year later, I'm 12 years old, and I'm eating dinner with my father and my aunts, and I'm going for a second bowl of rice. And then they're like, you know, if you eat too much, you're going to get fat and no one's going to love you. ... And you'll die alone.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was kind of, so then now eating food and watching what I eat and feeling this judgment, feeling this conditional love structure, that my worthiness is tied to my body.
Yeah.
It's complicated because we show affection through force feeding. And yet, whenever I see any of my relatives, that's the first comment is about my body. And never are they asking, hey, what's bringing you joy in your life? You know, or like, what are you excited about? It's more like, wow, like your imperfection is shameful.
Wow. But there's so many stories. I mean, food was a huge part of your upbringing, whether it was, you know, going to Sizzler, which I really want to talk about that story, or, you know, having to finish all of the food in your bowl.
And you worried you weren't American enough.
I love Sizzler. Cheesy toast.
The way you describe the baked potato, I'm like, I have to go get a baked potato. And in fact, the way you describe all of the food in the book, it was just so well done. And your love affair with food, and yet your complicated relationship with food is so palatable in this. Palatable. That's not the word. Palpable. And it's very palatable.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was such a huge part of, you know, your childhood and the culture, and you just so well done.
Well done. or medium rare.
Yeah, or medium rare, which I prefer. So, but there's this time where it's disrespectful to not finish the food you're given, but yet if you eat too much, you're going to get fat.
Yeah.
So you were really stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. There's that one scene where my mom and my sister and I are eating noodle soup at this restaurant in downtown Oakland. And she's like, you got to finish your fishball noodle soup. You got to finish it. There's like a piece of kidney left. Who wants to eat kidney? There's my favorite fishball. And there's like, and I'm struggling. And I was like, I don't want it anymore. And she was just like, you can't waste food. You know, anything you waste is like, every grain of rice you waste is a worm in hell, which makes no sense because we were Buddhist.
I know. I love that.
and so I keep eating because I don't want her to be upset and I want her approval. And then I throw it up all over the table in public. The fishball is floating away. It was the last piece that I was saving for myself, the best piece. And I remarked, like, that was the moment where that core memory was, you must listen to your elders and not listen to your body. And I formed this disconnect with my body. I never knew how I felt. I never knew if I was full. Because it was always like, can I get the approval and the love that I always feel like is a moving target?
Yeah, absolutely. And then your mom dies when you're 11. And so there's no grounding anymore, and everything kind of just goes haywire.
Yeah.
I have to say, you know, I'm sorry for your loss. Such a tragedy, but the story has become so beautiful in the way I see it, because you found her after all. I mean, you had to work hard to find her in stories, and no one would talk about her, and they still don't. Is that what you said earlier? They still don't. It's
been 27 years. I was just on vacation with my two siblings who are very supportive. Two of the siblings have really come and made a turn. One sibling hasn't is we pretend I don't do this, and with me and my dad, we pretend I don't do this.
Really?
My aunts are hustling books from their nail salon, which is cute.
I think so.
but even now, even though they've seen the show, so all of this journey I turned into a one-woman show and then turned into the book, even though those two siblings are very supportive, we still actually have not had a direct conversation.
Do you think they've learned about your mom through your book? And in some ways, that's probably good for them too. Assuming they've read it.
Yeah. The two of them have read it. My brother, I remember after he watched the show, I like forced him on stage for a Q&A, and he was like, "Wow, sis, yeah, I learned a lot, and I'm glad you did it, because now I don't have to tell my kids the story." And I was like, "That's not the purpose." I mean, I'm glad I created some type of family archive. I hope it's more of a tool, an additive tool, instead of the only tool, which is part of stemming from the problem, right? Is that we can't talk about it. This work, because my family would not talk about her, I found answers through depositions, spirit channelers, going back to Vietnam several times. And I remember I reached a point with my aunt where she realized, she's like, "Oh my God, like Susan really needs to finish this book." Fine, I'll finally tell her more stories, right? And at that point, after so many years of researching, putting it on stage, and then now doing the writing, I think I told her, I was like, "We got to get this right, because you can't edit a printer, right? Like the print, it goes to print and then it's done. So let's get everything right." And then she started to open up, but that's also when I had more specific questions I could ask her, which would then open up more stories. So.
Yeah. And it started with a friend, actually, a childhood friend of hers, who I think was a chef or a cook in Vietnam, who finally started telling you stories. The Bloody Feet story.
Yes. Actually, Bloody Feet was revealed from aunt number 4 in Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
And it was because I think I went back to Vietnam so many times, and I think they finally realized, like, "Oh,
she's
this
gonna
girl's
keep asking."
obsessed. Yeah, like she's not stopping. And then also, there's something about when I formalize it, when I'm like, "Hey, let me get you on camera, and then I'm gonna use that as part of the show," or "This is going into a show." They're like, "Oh, this is like official," and then they finally was like, "Fine, we'll do something."
Was that? Do you think there was like maybe they had more respect for what you were doing and why you were doing it at that point because it was official?
I don't think they ever fully understood what was going on. I remember after I created 140 Pounds, How Beauty Killed My Mother, I did a premiere in San Francisco on Mother's Day, and I invited my aunts. I don't think they've ever gone to a theater show before in their life. Like, there was one aunt who was like talking the whole time. And I was sitting there like eyeing my cousin to be like, shut her up, because I'm on stage. I play 15 characters in 65 minutes.
Wow.
There's quick change of lighting. I don't have costumes on. I don't have a mask. Like, and also I adapted it to a movie theater. It wasn't even a theater, you know? And so I'm sitting there being like, get aunt number 1 in check. Guys, somebody, like I was trying
to
do
something. I'm surprised you didn't just stop the show. Okay, folks, hold the phone. Here's what needs to happen. Stop talking.
Yeah. And I remember I talked to my aunts afterwards. I talked to Yi Hip and Yi Ngang, and I was like, "So what'd you think?" And they're like, "We don't understand what happened," and because their English isn't that good, right? But then they saw everyone clapping and get a standing ovation. Like they were like, "It seems like it was good." And then I was like, "Yeah." And afterwards, we have an after party at my sister's house, and we're all just sitting and eating. No one talks about the show. Like we just hang out, right? Like
back to it, yeah.
It's family is a funny thing, and crystallizing a family tragedy and sharing it publicly is also a funny thing. I think one of my aunts who has better English, I think she has tried to read it, and I think she gets the gist of it. But I think that they are proud, the aunts anyways.
They seem proud.
Yeah.
I saw them on Instagram. Yeah. In my stalking of you. Yeah.
Yeah. They were like trying to encourage
adorable.
people to read the book, and I'm like.
They're proud of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
lovely. And I know that your dad is proud of you too. The way he shows it is so weird.
Okay, Jennifer, I think I was like, you're making an assumption. Like, proud is like God, it's such a.
Does that word even exist in Vietnamese?
No.
Okay.
I mean, my Vietnamese is terrible, as you find out in the book. Like,
yeah.
Because I show like the generational divide. I have broken Vietlish. You know, I clunkily try to communicate like complex thoughts, but really I just sound like a toddler, right?
Well,
And-
you were, because you learned it when you were young, like 6-year-old.
Right.
Say, what is it? Vietlish? Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
I call it Vietlish. Yeah, and it's like after my mom died, and then my grandparents moved out with my aunts. It was it was just like a pushing away of the culture, right?
Yeah.
Like my dad, my sister, and I, like we used to be 13 people in a 4-bedroom house, and then within years after my mother dies, we are just 3 people in a house.
That scene where, I guess at this point you're 13 when they move out.
Yeah.
It hit me so hard. So for our listeners, you know, it's 2 years after your mom had died. And all of a sudden your grandparents and your aunties are all moving out, like the cook, and just your routine is suddenly gone and no one wants to talk about it. And I felt your pain. I felt your loneliness. It was so heavy. I just wanted to hug you. And I don't know how you can ever totally heal from something to have both of those tragedies happen back to back.
Yeah. One of the lines in the book is, we became refugees a second time
Totally.
after she died.
Well, and I think I wrote that line down, you know, that's how she truly died for me. That's exactly what you said. Avoiding her altogether, that's how she truly died for me. And that's what happened. Now there was no one to remind you of her. You know, it's just you and your sister, because your brothers had moved out by this point,
Yeah.
right?
They're in
Yeah.
college. But I mean, it's just so insane. She was the matriarch. She always had the answer. At this point, we now have 2 nail salons. Today's Nails 1, Today's Nails 2. Like, everyone is working. My sister and I are always at the shop. Like, mom knows everything, right? She was the general. And for someone so big to just, boom, be gone.
Yeah. And then no one talks about it. It's like this hole. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy, and I would ask questions. I would, you know, on her birthday, on the death anniversary, while we're like literally lighting incense for her, and everyone's like, "You're living in the past. Let it go. What's wrong with you?" Then I feel crazy.
Right. But so you have American culture because you go to school here and your friends are American, and so you're sort of living on this crossroads between the Vietnamese culture that they know and how they handle grief, and American culture and how we handle grief, and like television shows that I'm sure you saw. So you didn't have a roadmap for either.
Oh no. And also, it's like, I'm just a teenager now, and I'm just trying not to be like the lowest on the social totem pole. You know what I mean? Like, then I'm just trying to be a cool teenager and like kind of make it.
Yeah. Which is so hard for, you know, any, you know, refugee children too. I mean, I just can't imagine how hard that is to try and fit in at school and then go home and be the kid you're supposed to be to your parents. In this case, your dad, you know, so you're trying to do both.
There's this one scene that got cut from the book where I'm 16, I'm at my dad's nail salon, and I'm working the cash register, but also like I'm doing some AP summer homework or something during the summertime. And I'm just doing my work, and then I see all 3 of my crushes have become best friends, and they walk past the nail salon window. I see them. I'm sitting on a stool. I like almost like fall over because I'm so embarrassed that I'm working at my dad's nail salon, right? And I spend the next 4 hours wondering if they're going to walk back like the other direction because they were walking towards the mall. And I was just like mortified. You know what I mean? Like it's different for like American teenagers to be like, "Oh my God, my mom or dad picked me up from school. You're so embarrassing." But it was like, no, I had to work at the nail salon. and I didn't have a cool summer like these hot boys did. And also,
Right.
what if they actually discovered me there?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it was just like next level embarrassment because I was ashamed to be Vietnamese. I was ashamed that my dad worked at a nail salon.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And yet it's so amazing what your mom accomplished. Because again, they come over from Vietnam, she's on welfare, and then she starts her own nail salon. And the first nail salon was named after you. It was Susan's Nails.
Yeah. I always joke that my sister was like pissed about it, but she's
Yeah.
always like, no, I wasn't. And I was like, yeah, you were.
Because you were the baby, so it was good luck, right?
Yeah,
Is that how?
yeah.
Yeah. So I have to ask, like, when they sold that salon and then they opened Today's Nails 1, and of
Yeah.
course then later Today's Nails 2.
Yeah.
Were you a little hurt that they changed the name?
No, we moved. We moved from the Bay Area, Albany in the East Bay to Santa Rosa. And so we bought a business.
You okay?
And that was like the name of it. And
Right.
so that was fine. Like it was more like just one day they were like, okay, we're moving. And I was like, okay. You know,
They
like
didn't
when
give
you're
you
like,
any warning.
oh, no. I mean, I was 8 at the time when they bought Today's Nails, and then they started commuting. Like the family split up, and some would go work at Today's Nails so they could be under the old ownership and get to know the
Learn
new
it,
clientele
yeah.
while we're still working Susan's Nails.
Mm,
And then eventually we made that transition.
gotcha. That makes sense. So our listeners are going to ask, and you even talk about it in the book. So what are these people really talking about when they're speaking in Vietnamese and they're doing your nails? So tell us what they're really talking about.
Yeah. Oh, well, for the
And,
most
well, at
part,
least your aunties and your mom.
yeah. I mean, for the most part, we're not talking about you. Okay. We are talking about what we ate on the weekend, what seafood is on sale, which new pho is the best place, right?
Right.
Like we're talking about our lives.
Mm-hmm. But
We're talking about our lives.
and isn't it funny that people are like, oh, they're talking about me, which is so ridiculous. Like, why would they be talking about you?
Yeah.
Unless it's to
Unless-
say this person goes by this, her daughter went to college here. Give 'em-
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like an oral CRM system, okay? Like, I want to, like, if now you're taking care of Helen, right? Because maybe you're too busy, and so my mom, who usually has Helen, is doing something else, whatever. And then it's like, okay, let me get up to speed so that I can, with the English I have, interact and build a relationship with my customer, right?
Yeah,
It's biz
yeah.
dev,
Yep.
okay? So it's either filling in the information, or also if something like kind of weird happens, because like sometimes we would have like women who would come in who they're kind of like off their rocker a little bit, like they didn't seem like mentally stable, but they would start yelling at us and like accuse us of like some, like basically they didn't want to pay for one broken nail, okay?
Right.
And then you're just kind of like, let's just do it, give it to her for free, and like get her out of here, right? Like,
Don't
it's
ruin
called
it for everyone else.
Yeah, crisis management. And then we would just say that in Vietnamese and boom, like get them out, right?
Right.
And then like Susan, get her stuff and like move her to the dryer and like move her out, right? Like, so part of it is let's efficiently operate. Let's make sure we maintain client relationships here. Or if someone like had to wait for a long time, because usually my role was also to entertain the customers, especially when they're running late, because I was so clumsy with my hands. They only give me one chance to paint a girl's nails, and I messed up. And so from then on, I was like the utility player that just didn't do nails, but I did everything else. And so if I'm trying to entertain the customer, and then she leaves in a huff, and then you can feel energetically in the store, like people feel sad, like, oh, we lost out on that money, or she's mad at us, or maybe she won't ever come back. Then maybe my mom would reassure everyone, be like, you know what? She doesn't even tip that well anyways. Or like,
Right.
or like, it's okay. We're fine. We don't need her. Like there was also, kind of like, how do you address the anxiety? How do you make sure the morale is good? How do we make sure that we take care of our customers? And also like, Cindy has a bunion. And if you do this and that, it's not going to help. Or like, oh yeah, she's got the fungus thing. Susan, go get the drops over there to like take care of it, right? Like, it's not like you're literally sitting in front of me and I'm just going to badmouth you. Because why? It's a symbiotic relationship.
Right.
It's so intimate. I'm literally holding your hands.
Yeah, yeah.
I want you to be happy. We can, even if my English is not at the level of communication that I would communicate to you in Vietnamese, because guess what? Your Vietnamese is not that good, right? Then can you energetically feel connected to me?
That's what it was. Your mom had the ability to energetically connect with people.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. And make them feel important and special.
And she taught all her sisters to do the same.
You talk about in the book that you thought when you were a kid, you were just really emotional. And do you want to talk a little bit about mental health?
I mean,
It's
what
out
about
there.
it, girl?
Yeah. You know, you got to wonder if maybe your mom wasn't bipolar. You know, she was never diagnosed, of course. But, you know, her ups and downs were pretty bipolar-esque.
Yeah. I mean, I just remember one of the first memories of my mother is we're driving on the Bay Bridge, and she tells my dad to stop so she can walk home, so she can leave. You know, we're all crying. I'm crying, trying to get her back in, and then there's cars behind us. She slams the door, and then we have to drive home.
And there's no like walkway for her. It's just for cars. But
Yeah.
So you think she just wanted to see the view? What was going on there?
I mean, she was mad. They were in an argument.
Oh, okay.
I mean, okay, I do need to say that after my editor greenlit the whole manuscript and my sister did a read, she was like, "You're dumb, dude. That wasn't the Bay Bridge. That was the I-80." Right? And so I was sitting there going like, what? Because she's still older than me, so I'm going to assume her memory is right.
Yeah.
But then I sat and I thought about it around creative license. And I thought about how for the last 30 years,
That's been your truth.
I believed it was the Bay Bridge. I believed it was that crazy and insane. And let's be honest, walking out on any freeway is crazy and insane. And so I kept it in there as the Bay Bridge because that's how terrifying it was to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I think that's so valid. I mean, when you're writing a memoir, it's your memory. It's your truth. It doesn't matter if someone else remembers it differently.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. Oprah's going to have your ass.
No, there's a difference between outright lying and making shit up.
Yeah.
And remembering something that affected you so deeply and, you know, was visceral for you. That was your experience, regardless if it was anyone else's experience. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I remember the next morning, Mom was there and she was just making some eggs. And
like everything's fine.
We never talked about it.
Yeah.
We never talked about it. And I mean, that was a big lesson for me, which is don't piss off Ma. Don't piss her off, right? And I, throughout the years, I would not say she was like manic depressive. Like it was more like you just are terrified of Ma and do not get her mad, right?
She was like the sun, right?
Oh, but burning in your eyes, son.
Yeah.
Like I remember I was this scene got cut too, but I used to love watching Blossom when I was like 7 or 8, and she caught me watching Blossom, and then she said, "You know, you're not allowed to do this." Walks downstairs. My brother comes up, and then I'm gonna be spanked. Like she just delegates the terror, right? And it's so ironic because then the first time I later find out when she went to go get plastic surgery.
Wait, she had your brother spank you?
Oh yeah, she didn't have time for that.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
She didn't have time for that. No.
Yeah, that's crazy.
No. Oh yeah, it was like, am I gonna get spanked? Is it the belt? Is it the feather duster but with the wooden stick? Like,
yeah,
you know, like so the thing about Vietnamese culture is there's rank and file, right? There's the hierarchy. There's no sense of I, right? We don't have, our pronouns are all relational.
Yeah.
Right? Like I would be sussing out like, okay, you're about my mom's age, or maybe you're older than my mom's age, but you're her friend, or you're related on this side. You know, like that's how we configure what we call each other. And so that's what I want to just emphasize for the listeners out there is that the fact that I did write this, and my family does not talk about this, like there's actually really high stakes here.
Totally.
Like this is the ultimate way to disobey.
Were you terrified that they would just not speak to you again? That you would be disowned?
Oh my God. I mean, when you read later in the work that when I went to college, my whole Harvard chapter is actually about me being in a cult.
Yeah. Wow, that was pretty
like,
crazy.
Like, I wanted to belong so bad in my family. And because I always felt like the black sheep, because I always wanted to talk about the past, to process anything, that I was so desperate I went to go find belonging in a cult. You have to understand that that's where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And that at one point during my fake graduation, because I was off a semester at school, they like went to one of the Korean yoga classes, and they were like, "You're in a cult," but they said it in such an insensitive way,
right?
That I was like, what's the point of my? I knew that it was a cult, but what's the point of going back to my default life,
right?
Because it's not that great anyways.
You were getting something that you desperately needed from that cult, from those people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the social rules were more clear on how to get that approval of like what you needed to do to be good.
Yeah.
And it was just always unclear in my family, or I felt like the rules were changing, or it's a funny thing to feel so much shame around wanting to be close.
Weird. Just say that again. Wow.
It's a funny thing to feel so much shame around wanting to be close.
Wow. Yeah, how do you wrap your brain around that? How do you heal from that? And yet there's something at the back of your book toward the end. I feel like your dad said it, but maybe I'm wrong. When we feel, we heal.
Yeah, so I said that. I
Okay.
said that, and I say it in the book 3 times because I think so much in Vietnamese culture anyways, it's like we are emotionally repressed. I'm going to say that for Asian Americans, and then I'm going to just say that for America. Like, because it is just, who wants to feel anything anymore? It can be scary. It can be uncomfortable. So why don't I just numb it out with alcohol or drugs or sex or shopping or anything clickbaitable, right? Like, why face my own stuff? It's too painful. And I'm kind of sitting here going like, you know what, guys? Because I never faced the trauma, because there's so much unresolved grief, it's lodged in my body. It is stuck. And even though everyone thinks I'm living in the past, because I am not addressing it, I cannot live in the present. And I need to move that. And I can only move that by going through the different stages of grief.
Yeah.
By actually feeling these things. And then hopefully then I can be on post-traumatic growth.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, then I
yeah.
can like draw power from it. But if we are always living in this constant denial, we are going nowhere.
Tell us about the healing that you've gotten from feeling this, from digging into it and really feeling it.
My God. Ooh. Have you ever played 15 characters in 65 minutes? Night after night, telling the same story, talking about the duality of joy and tragedy over and over and over again. I mean, first of all, my solo show that I took on a 10-city national tour, 140 Pounds, How Beauty Killed My Mother, that was the 5th iteration.
Yeah. Wow.
And I remember, to tell my family's story, I had to actually know what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so each of these iterations were live, the learning of it, and then I would share it with the audience. It was my way to learn. And I think by knowing the past, by knowing the secrets, by naming the shame of it and putting it on stage, that was cathartic for me.
It's like the audience was your therapy. Their reaction in some way. Yeah.
So I called it therapeutic theater. And what I never anticipated was that when I bare my soul out to you, and I saw people also laughing and crying while I was laughing and crying on stage, it was then that I realized that my story was validated in that way through the audience, and that there was meaning for them, and that also I was not alone in my desire to belong in my family.
Yeah. That is just human, right?
Yeah.
I think in so many ways. But this book is a deep dive into, as you said, generational trauma, the immigrant experience, the refugee experience, our obsession with beauty, It literally killed your mom.
Yeah.
And she was lovely. Every photo of her, she looked perfect. She didn't need to do any of those things, but she was convinced by a predatory plastic surgeon, it seems like, who I feel like we should talk about that story too. Like, that's just crazy. Like, this thing kind of started because you wanted revenge. You wanted to avenge your mother's death.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So for a long time, so when I found out that my mom was in a coma, I was 11 years old. We drove an hour to San Francisco, and she was in a coma for 5 days. She had lost oxygen to her brain for 2 hours. 2 hours into the surgery, she lost oxygen to her brain. The doctor waited 14 minutes before calling 911. And usually 4 minutes without oxygen to your brain, you have permanent brain damage. Okay. So he waited 14 minutes, then called 911. She was rushed over to the hospital, and then after 5 days, she died.
Mm.
At the time, everyone kept calling it a stomach surgery. And so as a kid, I was like, why was she having stomach surgery? Like, I didn't understand that she went in for a tummy tuck, the narrowing of her nostrils, and a chin implant. I also, at the time, did not understand that he had 20 lawsuits against him, was on probation, and did not have medical malpractice insurance. And yes, actively advertised to the Vietnamese community. He was a white man, about maybe in his early 50s. This is 1996 in San Francisco. Because my family has never talked about it, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know much about what happened until I remember in high school, my crush brought me the newspaper, and it was an expose about my mother and the doctor and what was going on. Because we tried to sue him, but remember, he didn't have medical malpractice insurance.
Right.
I learned more from that news article than my own family. So we try to sue him. We can't. He walks away. He loses his license for 2 years. Never pays my family a dime. And then after the 2 years, he continues to practice on probation until he dies. Wow. Which begs the question, what is the purpose of probation?
Right. Yeah.
And also, when you're on probation, you don't have to tell your clients you're on probation. And it doesn't prevent you from doing anything different.
Right.
Okay. So I didn't know any of this until I am in grad school, business school. My professors are like, your world is your oyster. Do what you want in life. Yeah. And then I'm sitting there going like, I just one night I'm working on a problem set and I'm thinking, wow, like I graduated from Harvard. I'm about to graduate from Yale. Like I am so privileged. And yet this injustice happened to my family and never got resolved. Right. So I start Googling him, find out he's still alive. And I was like, oh, I'm a marketer. I know how to launch a multi-pronged marketing campaign so that you are going to suffer.
Right.
I was going to get a journalist to do an expose, a billboard by his clinic. I was going to do targeted Facebook ads to him. Like I just became so obsessed. At the same time I was graduating, I had to go find a job. This guy I'm dating, are we like serious? Am I going to move to Seattle with him? You know, and so I'm like, okay, let me just move to Seattle and then I'm going to go focus on the doctor.
Right.
We moved to Seattle. I'm about to do this whole smear campaign. And then I found out he died.
Nah. Yeah.
God damn it.
Right. Yeah. It's like,
I know.
You want him to suffer because your mom wasn't the only one who suffered under his knife either.
No.
There are many cases against him.
Yeah. I mean, she was the only death. People's breasts were mutilated. Like their healing wasn't okay. And then so there was like blood and got juices all over it. Like it was just like, I was sitting there going like, this is too much. But remember, I am trying to track him down because I think I'm going to get closure from my mom's death because I can't get it from my own family. Mm-hmm. Right. So the question is how can you have an enemy when they're dead?
Yeah, right.
How do you win when now you have no enemy?
Yeah. Yeah, there's no one to fight anymore. So then you turn to something else and you concentrate on something else.
Yeah, I got married.
You got married and then you lose your job. You're working at Microsoft, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at that point, I want to say that I got married and I got a lot of pressure from my dad and aunts to have kids. Mm-hmm. And so I'm at this point where I go like, well, how do I become a mother if I never knew my own?
Yeah.
And concurrently, because, you know, there's always got to be plot A and plot B. Concurrently, like, how do I become a mother if I feel like I'm a coward in my own life? Right? Like, at that point, I felt like I was disappointed with the adult I had become. My entire life, I was this overachiever and did all these leadership development programs, and I'm going to be so great. I get my MBA, I come to Seattle, and really most of the jobs, like all the money in Seattle is like leads to Microsoft. And so I'm a contractor there, it's fine. And it's the life my father always wanted for me. I had PTO, I had a 401k, I was giving him money every month. I was being the good daughter I was supposed to be. And yet I was completely miserable. And so I thought, wow, like, how can I have a kid and say, hey, be what you want in life if I never did it myself? Because years prior, I had started stand-up comedy and I was crushing it. And then I get heckled at this charity comedy show and then I walk away.
Yeah.
Like being on stage, I was in my orbit. I felt so alive. It felt so good. And then I just kind of threw it away and I thought, oh, how foolish of me to think I was even good at that.
Wow. But you were so susceptible to being put down, being told you weren't good enough, because that's what you dealt with your whole life.
Yeah, and most of the time I believe people, right? Like I'm just like, oh, okay. You know, I think that there was just a new motivator, which is like, I knew I'd be a great tiger mom. You know, like I knew I would project and resent my child and like force them into excellence for me. And then I was like, my ultimate terror, oh my God, I'd have to pay for their therapy. So I decided to just prove to myself I wasn't a coward. And so I started taking solo performance classes. I eventually put on my first show, which the original intention, I was going to do really absurdist stuff. I was really into Andy Kaufman.
I love that, actually. That's so awesome.
Like I was not, my intent was like, hey, you know, it'd be really great if I talk about my family tragedy. You know, like I was so accustomed to never talking about it to anyone, my fans, my friends, my family. Like it was so not allowed that I couldn't even imagine that I would ever share it on stage.
Of course.
But then I did.
Yeah, but then
I did.
But yeah. I love the story too of where you took this course, I think, and everyone's like telling this story and then you tell yours and everyone's just like silent. And then they're like, oh my God, that was powerful. And you're like, wait, what? Wait, what do you mean?
I was like, oh, you haven't avenged your mother's death? You haven't looked for her killer? And it was, well, here's the crazy thing. It was 5 minutes. It was really intense. Everyone was like really shell-shocked. And then we spend the next 7 weeks of this course just doing like body mechanics stuff, like just being in your body and feeling what it's like to be on stage. But I never talk about it ever again. And the final capstone project, I do some absurdist stuff where I'm wearing a rainbow poncho. The lights are dark. I touch a hammer. I don't touch the hammer. Am I going to kill you with this hammer? Now I'm going to put raisins in each of your mouths. In scene. You know, like it was so weird. Like I never went back to the family story part.
And they're like, wait, what's happening?
Yeah, well, because I tell you, it was just like a passing thought, like this avenge my mother stuff, because it's just like, I don't know. I was so accustomed to never being allowed to talk about it that even the first time I ever talked about it, I felt like I like broke the law. That
you did break the law, the family law.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just this thing where I had no intention. It was not. I didn't think that this was then going to become my future career.
What has been the most surprising about this journey?
I still feel like I have to fight for my worthiness every day.
After all the work you've done. Yeah.
Like I gotta deal with Celadon Macmillan, like top 5 publisher. Like I got color pictures of my family in here. It's like embossed. Like
yeah.
You know, like it feels like Goosebumps. The cover feels like Goosebumps. Like to other people, they'd be like, wow, that's awesome, you know? And like my final stop on my book tour, I got to speak at the Smithsonian.
Very cool.
You know what I mean? Like, like I have hustled my way to telling our family story, and yet I'm always just like still so doubtful of myself. Like the creative process continues to feel so scary. I've got a number of ideas that I want to work on, and yet it's like, it still is hard.
Yeah.
You know? And so I guess it's like, I wish I was a rational being. I wish I'd be like, oh, you feel doubtful about yourself? Let's look at evidence of past success, Susan. Like, I want my therapist to always be with me, not just every other week. And she's not, you know? And it's like, I don't, the doubt never goes away, you know? And maybe that's also the driver for my success is that this anxiety that I feel. But if you read the prologue, it's like, the level of anxiety I was feeling just to finish this book, like, got me in the hospital twice. And and now that I have a 4-year-old, it's just like, I'm trying to have this perspective of my health and what I need to do to feel enough each day, and to be at ease with the moment. But it is this ongoing thing that I'm actively working with meditation and working out. And I gotta say, like, with the family, we're in a good place, but it's never going to be Full House, you know? Like, it's never going to be Danny Tanner and Michelle. Like, and yet I still pine for it.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like this book is a really important piece of literature because it's a part of the American story. You know, coming to America and trying to find yourself. And like, look at us. We're all still trying to find ourselves. And that's the human experience. And by the way, the cover is beautiful. I love the fact that it almost looks like the sign you would see in a manicurist window, and then the neon is raised. So it's the goosebumps she was talking about. It's so cool. I was like, oh my God, this is really well done. Yeah, they did a great job. Are you proud of it?
Absolutely. But, you know, I gotta say, it still feels like a dream. And I'm proud of it when people give me fan notes.
Oh, that's great.
And then,
yeah.
And I get them. I'm getting them on the daily, which is kind of cool.
That's great. Email or actual letters in the mail?
No, not letters.
You don't.
Yeah,
they don't send them to your publisher and they forward them on to you.
Oh, this is not the 90s. I get email, Instagram message, and Facebook message, I guess, and LinkedIn message. But someone just yesterday sent me this note, and she was like, "I'm only halfway through it, but I decided to write you a note."
Oh,
and she was talking about how she also asked her aunt for money when she was in a cult, and I was like, what?
Oh my gosh.
But I was telling my husband, because I'm always like, affirm me, and I was like, Marvin, have you ever like read a book, not even finished it, and it contacted the author? He was like, no. I was like, have you even ever contacted an author? He was like, well, no. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, I hope that there's something is happening here. You know, like I hope it's resonating with people. I hope it's making a difference. I hope there's meaning, because for me, it's like, I poured my heart into this, and then I'm like, I don't know if I have a second book in me, but here you go. I really hope you do have a life, you know, like, I hope you do make it on a bestseller list one day, baby. Like, and right now there's great news happening. Like, 4 universities are teaching it. 2 high schools are, one's teaching it in their AP language curriculum, one in the ethnic studies course in California. Like,
wow, that's
folks are piloting it. Yeah. So like, I need to remind myself it exists without me performing every night.
Boy. Good on you. That I can't imagine how exhausting that was.
Oh my God, dude. I look back on that. I performed the show 60 times to 7,000 people in 1 year.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was pregnant.
just on top of that.
Oh my God.
Incredible. Well, I'm so glad you wrote the book. And, you know, for me personally, I got a lot out of it. You know, this idea of us loving ourselves, it's so hard, not just from a beauty perspective too, but that sense of feeling worthy. And is it enough? Is it ever enough? We're always reaching for more and trying to do more and be smarter, be more beautiful, you know, be better. But if we could just stop for a moment and just appreciate what our bodies give us. I love your TEDx talk where you're talking to your belly about your belly fat. So listeners, read the book, but also watch your TEDx talk. It's so good.
It's called How to Make Peace with Your Belly Fat. And it's basically my ancestors slapping me around, slapping some sense into me in a sweat lodge.
We all need that. It's great. It's great. And so we'll let people pull that up and watch it. Thank you, Susan Liu, so much for joining us, for writing this incredible book. It's raw, it's real, it's genuine, and well written, as I said, but it's incredibly entertaining. If you've ever felt lost or wondered where you belong, this book is for you.
And I gotta say, I perform the audiobook.
Oh, you do? Yeah, the audiobook.
Yes.
Oh, that would be great.
Yes. My middle school best friend, we were talking yesterday. He was like, "Oh my God, the Uncle Number 9 character," and then you start becoming him. And it's like when I was recording, I wanted to perform, I wanted to move my body, and they're like, "Whoa, Susan, like always like 2 inches from the mic, so you can't actually move that much." So I'm like trying to be animated and doing it, but like perfectly still.
Right.
Yeah. And there is some Vietnamese in the book, so I think if you know. We can make up what we think the Vietnamese sounds like, or I can read it to you in Vietnamese.
Honestly, I might go back and listen to it. Yeah, because I was wishing I knew how to pronounce them. And in fact, that's one of the things I really wanted to talk about. And I know I'm going to keep you a little bit longer if that's okay. But the parts, I feel like it was so brilliant how you named the parts of the book. Ma. Can you tell us how to pronounce the 5 different ways to say ma and then tell us what they mean? Is that too much to ask?
No, it's totally fine. Okay, so first off, Vietnamese is a phonetic language. There's 6 tones. Mandarin is like 4 tones. Okay, so like it's like 6 tones. And when you change the tone, you change the meaning of the word. So ma means ghost. That's part 1. Part 2, ma means tomb. Ma, butt. Ma, mother. Ma, newborn rice seedling. And ma, horse. And so I take these 6 meanings of ma and I separate the book that way, and that's how I organize it. Because at the end of the day, I'm still Vietnamese American.
Mm-hmm.
And both of these identities make me.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, through my research, my persistence, my absurd adventures, I come to understand all meanings of ma and to know my mother.
Yeah. And it was so perfect. I was like, wow, really, really powerful.
It was my agent's idea. Oh my God, structure was so hard. I have so many Post-it notes on the whiteboard. I was moving and moving and moving. I was banging my head against the wall. And one day my agent was like, "But what about the 6 meanings of ma? What about that? Like, just try that." And I was like, And then I started trying it. And, because you can't force it, right?
Yeah,
but then you got to see what's going to work. And then finally I was like, all right, this feels good. And then there you have it.
Nice. Well, I feel like it was kind of meant to be. Yeah. Because as you were describing it, the different meanings of ma, like they just worked so perfectly for those parts of the book. And I don't know, maybe there's some divine intervention there.
Oh my God. So much divine intervention. My mom is like a task manager. Like I gotta iterate again. I am not a trained theater artist. I have never taken a creative writing class. I never saw myself as an artist. And yet these miraculous moments would happen where I always knew my lines. Sometimes I'd be reaching for my lines like 10,000 words a night. You know what I mean? Like, but when I look back on the last 6 years, it does feel like a dream.
I bet.
And I think it is because of divine intervention. And my mother comes to me through Psychic Cindy. and I'm sitting here going like, "Mom, am I exploiting your story? Like, should I do this? Like, what should I do?" And she was like, "Oh, honey, this is not about you. Number 1, this is a mother's love. And yet number 2, we got work to do. We are healers on this planet. Let's go get some work done."
And she says, don't leave anything out, right?
Yeah.
She wants it told.
Yeah.
And it needed to be told. Otherwise, her story
Yeah.
stopped. And now it does not stop.
Yeah. When she came to me that one night, she said, don't cover up the story. Don't cover up the story.
Yeah.
For all your listeners out there, you can actually watch 140 Pounds. You can stream it from my website, and you can see me embody my family characters and also my mother, which was actually really hard for me to do in the beginning during rehearsals. But that is a really intense moment because I retell that moment, which is in the book too, of her coming to me. But when I retell it, it's so intense.
Where can people stream that?
Just go to susanliu.me and then click on 140 Pounds, pay $4.99.
A bargain.
Support an artist.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I hope people do. I hope people buy the book. I hope they watch 140 Pounds more or over 140 Pounds. I think was the second.
Oh, I just put 140 Pounds online. I feel like over, I was like, it's okay. But the 140 Pounds, it was such a tight show. And because over 140 Pounds started to come a little experimental and it's such a long show. Oh my God. I think I was on stage for like 95 minutes and I was like 9 months pregnant.
Wow.
Wow is right. I was like, this is insane. What am I doing?
Right. So when was the last show of over 140 pounds and how close was it to Art's birth?
Yeah. It was February 2020. It was early February 2020. And then his birth was March 30, 2020. The best time to have a baby.
Nice. Why?
Because it was COVID, girl.
Okay. Not March 30th, just 2020 in general. Like right when you're going into the hospitals and everyone has COVID. Gotcha.
Right. But it's March 30. So it's still like, kind of the beginning. And remember, patient 0 was actually in greater Seattle area.
In Seattle. That's right.
Yes. So it was just kind of like a really weird apocalyptic time where like no cars are on the road. I don't know if my partner is allowed to be with me in the delivery room. Like it was just such a weird time.
Yeah.
And no one came to help.
You had to do it all on your own because no one was allowed in with you.
No.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, Marvin was in the operating room, but like in terms of just, I felt a lot of grief around my mom not being alive, right? At the time when I was like, oh, I wish like my mom would be here to show me or help me or
sure,
like just the maternal instinct and like hand off the baton. And when my mother-in-law couldn't come, my aunt couldn't come, my family friend couldn't come, I was just like, that was even more isolating for me, let alone it being the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, that was hard on so many people. Wow. Well, I think we are at the end of our hour. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming, for joining us, for writing this fantastic book. I hope people will buy it. You can learn more about Susan on Instagram. Hopefully you'll follow her and stalk her like I did at Susan Lieu. That's Lieu. And of course, she's on TikTok, Susan Lieu Official. And of course, don't forget Sokola Chocolatier opening up in the San Francisco airport. Visit them in San Francisco. And you have a podcast we haven't even talked about, Model Minority Moms.
That's right. So my 2 other Harvard classmates, one's Korean, one's Chinese, we talk about what it is to be everything for everyone else but ourselves.
Yeah.
And how not dealing with your intergenerational trauma bleeds into you as a parent, as you as a partner, you and your career. And how parenthood just forces you to have a reckoning with all that.
You guys have way too much fun on that podcast. I just want to say it's pretty awesome.
Oh my God. I feel like we really hit our stride. We've been doing it for 3 years now. We're hitting our stride and it's just really beautiful to see. But also like from just like a type A, like overachiever personality, that's how I get my friendship time in.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. It's got to be fun or why do it, right? So awesome. So many ways for you to support Susan and check her out and get to know her. And again, thank you so much, Susan. We appreciate you.
Oh my gosh, Jeniffer, Chad, thank you so much for having me on the pod.
This has been another episode of The Premise. You can visit us online at thepremisepod.com and subscribe and rate or review. wherever you get your podcasts. Those reviews really help us get the word out and increase our subscriber base. You can also follow me, your host, on Instagram at Jennifer Grace, or follow me on Facebook at Jennifer Thompson Consulting. Until next week, thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye. And you are worthy.